Hello, friends. My name is Casey Carbone, and I have the great pleasure of serving as the Director for Congregational Connection here in Hudson River Presbytery. And I also have the joy, the privilege of being able to spend some time in reflection with you over the course of this Advent season, looking at some of the Advent passages, reflecting on the themes of Advent, and to share some questions for reflection to you as well to help you grow and to ask questions, to discern what is on your heart this Advent season. If you are listening or if you're watching, that's great. But you can also find the written out version of these devotions as well by clicking on the Hudson River Presbytery Facebook page. You can just click or search for Hudson River Presbytery, and you'll see that each Wednesday morning we'll share one of these posts, one of these devotions with you. As well, if you're also subscribed to our weekly newsletter, Presby News, you'll see that there's a link to it in there as well, and you're more than welcome to share that with your congregation or use it for your own personal study and meditation on these Advent passages. Just a way to offer some other things for your own spiritual enrichment during this Advent season. Part of what we will be looking at in these various Advent reflections is we're going to be looking, as I said, at the scripture readings. There's going to be online, if you look at the actual posting, there's a song for you to reflect on. And then in addition to the meditation, there's an opportunity, a time for you to reflect on some questions as well. And you're free to leave a comment on Facebook if there was something that was really on your heart that you want to leave to share. Otherwise, I encourage you to perhaps even keep a journal or keep a little pad of paper for you to keep some notes on as well. So as we begin this first week's reflection, you'll see that there's a song if you're online or if you're listening as well, depending on what platform you're listening on. You can search, if you'd like to first, a song by Christopher Grundy called We Have Come as well as sort of a centering song. The scripture that we're going to be reading today and sort of be focusing on today as well is the first gospel reading for this Advent season. And it comes to us from the gospel according to Mark chapter 13, verses 24 to 37. If you want to follow along, that's great. And if you are watching, you're more than welcome to follow along on the screen as well. So let us begin this time of reflection, meditation on this idea of apocalyptic hope. So let us listen now to God's holy word and what it says to us this day. But in those days, after that suffering, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light, and the stars will be falling from heaven, and the powers in the heavens will be shaken. Then they will see the Son of Man coming in clouds with great power and glory. Then he will send out angels and gather the elect from the four winds, from the ends of the earth to the ends of heaven. From the fig tree, learn its lesson. As soon as its branch becomes tender and puts forth its leaves, you know that summer is near. So also, when you see these things taking place, you know that he is near at the very gates. Truly, I tell you, this generation will not pass away until all these things have taken place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. But about that day or hour, no one knows, neither the angels in heaven nor the Son, but only the Father. Beware, keep alert, for you do not know when the time will come. It is like a man going on a journey when he leaves his home and puts his slaves in charge, each with his work, and commands the doorkeeper to be on the watch. Therefore, keep awake, for you do not know when the master of the house will come, in the evening, or at midnight, or at the cockcrow, or at dawn. Or else he may find you asleep when he comes suddenly. And what I say to you, I say to all, keep awake. Friends, this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Friends, so on this day, we are first reflecting on this idea of apocalyptic hope. And if you're someone who follows the liturgical calendar, you might have noticed that in recent readings, there's this trend towards the apocalyptic. Perhaps it was the parable of the 10 maidens, or even in the recent reading from Matthew 25. Well, all the gospel readings so far the last couple of weeks have been from Matthew 25, but even in this last week's reading, Jesus talks about what we do to the least of these, how we do it for him. There's this trend that we see even in the reading from Mark's gospel towards the apocalyptic. And I've always wondered how these apocalyptic readings relate to the season of Advent. How does the apocalyptic relate to this season of Advent? But given everything that's happening in the world, still ongoing wars in Europe, a crisis in the Middle East, crises here at home in our own backyards, with all these things happening, perhaps we need a little, if not a lot, of apocalyptic hope right now. We need apocalyptic hope this Advent to shake us from whatever malaise or whatever fear or whatever that feeling of stagnation is gripping our hearts or the heart of the church. Though what I find most challenging about apocalyptic hope is perhaps the idea of the apocalypse itself, not really having grown up in a home or a church tradition that really emphasized this idea. But when we sort of break it down, this idea of apocalyptic hope, perhaps there's not much of a tension there. Perhaps we find that nevertheless, as scary as it might seem, that in life and in faith, there are moments that require periods of destruction. There are periods that require a shedding of past things, a casting off of the old in order for newness to emerge. We see this in our own natural world. We see this in those places where there's forest fires, and even though it's a great scene of devastation, we know that in many cases seeds are dropped. Seeds that could only take root and bring forth new life because there was a shedding of the old. And while I'm not an economist, and while I don't really enjoy talking about faith in economic terms, we see this as well through the idea of creative destruction. That there are just some things that will be inevitably destroyed, shed, cast off, what have you, in order to make way for newness, new ideas, new innovations, new methods, new ways of doing things, new thinking. Though as we think about apocalyptic hope, I understand that apocalyptic hope may not be what you're hoping for this Advent season. Apocalyptic hope may not be what you are expecting. with all the trials, especially, and with all the difficulties that clergy are facing, what your pastor's facing, what you're facing, what your volunteers, what your elders, your deacons, what the youth in your church, what the young people are facing. I understand apocalyptic hope might not be what you are expecting. And with all these trials and with all these difficulties, resilience seems to be the reoccurring theme of every conversation. So if that's the case, you might wonder, how then do we gather enough strength? How do we gather strength within ourselves, within our communities, to embrace the newness that comes with the arrival of apocalyptic hope? What else could we possibly let go of in order to embrace such a risky sounding Advent hope? I don't think there's any shame. I don't think there's any shame in admitting that there's a lack of capacity for embracing apocalyptic hope. But what I do believe is that regardless of whether we have full capacity or even partial capacity, there's still the call for us to resist the temptation of reverting back to the old way of doing things. Apocalyptic hope demands something of us. It demands an evaluation, a continuous evaluation, a continual discernment of what it is we hold on to, whether that is a purging of the old in order to live into the newness God envisions for our collective lives. Not just our lives, our life, but our collective lives. Because if we don't, I think we run the risk of turning in on ourselves. Turning in on ourselves, turning in on our faith and in our church in order to seek what is comfortable, in order to seek what is familiar. But doing so would not align with God's vision for the new things that will emerge among us. I believe that this Advent season, as we think about the theme of hope, apocalyptic hope, that we are called to listen and to embrace such a risky hope that leads to a renewed sense of missional and relational identity. Perhaps living in apocalyptic hope will help reframe things for us. Perhaps it will help us shed fears over our budgets. Perhaps it'll help us shed our fear over our buildings or how many people we have in the pew on Sunday and bring us back to the heart of our ministry. I know for myself, I can say apocalyptic hope has helped reframe some of these priorities for myself. For instance, for me, apocalyptic hope helped to reframe a sense of mission and outreach. Instead of solely focusing on recruiting members for the sake of getting new leaders, for new giving units, or, for filling spots on committees, what if instead of focusing on those things, we focused instead on cultivating a ministry of relationships? Because personally, I've come to believe that if we focused on relationships, if we focused on these things and nurturing them, everything else will fall into place. And as we look around again, knowing all the difficulties of life that are surrounding us now, what better opportunity is there for us to embrace a notion of apocalyptic hope that recenters us, grounds us on what is important? Apocalyptic hope might sound intimidating, but if we listen, there's an opportunity for us to shed and cast off all that which is not life-giving. Apocalyptic hope might be the message we need to hear this Advent season as we stand on the verge of the new thing God is doing in our midst. So friends, let us listen with open hearts and open minds to where the apocalyptic hope of Advent is guiding us. And as you continue to meditate on the reading from Mark and on this idea of hope, I just have a few questions for you, if you would like to sit with them and meditate on them. The first question is this: how does the idea of turning, of upheaval and renewal align with the Advent season's theme of anticipation and preparation? Can you identify moments in your life where embracing change led to unexpected renewal or growth? Question 2. How do you think resilience can coexist with the willingness to embrace the newness that comes with apocalyptic hope during Advent? Can you share examples or strategies for balancing the need for resilience with a readiness for the transformative change that takes place in our individual lives and in our church? And lastly, during this meditation, we ask the idea of what it looks like to reframe our purpose for ministry. So how might these shifts in emphasis impact the fabric of your faith or your church's faith or your church's life together during this Advent season? Can you perhaps reflect on specific ways in which prioritizing relationships over traditional or institutional concerns might lead to a more vibrant and authentic expression of faith and community? So friends, this again is our first weekly devotional on the idea of hope, apocalyptic hope, using a reading from the Gospel according to Mark. And I look forward to seeing you next week as we reflect on the Advent theme of peace in a devotional titled Peace in Our Time. So friends, thank you, and I'll see you again next week.